you what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
My name's Gabriel Iterbi. I'm the Business Solutions Manager at Online Education Services. One of the main reasons why I came to this conference was because of the amazing list of speakers. It's quite rare that we get such a large kind of presentation or conference as we do like this in Melbourne. So it's fantastic that the team here have organised DevOps talks. Had a really good range of speakers. It was fantastic to hear from Scott about Google and how they operate, to hear about serverless architecture, to hear about there's so many definitions of DevOps, and I think it impacts just about everybody in a business. It's not just a technology thing, and it's not just a DevOps thing. It's everybody. So it's fantastic to have so many great speakers here.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth, because I'm happy.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister Deladarkos was supposed to be doing this talk, as you would have seen from the program, and it's unfortunate that he can't be here today, but what that does do is give me the opportunity to talk to you folks. The Minister, as many of you may know, is a very keen supporter and advocate for the IT industry in this state. And the key policy points that he would have been talking around would have been skills and the work the government is doing to promote skills, cyber and data security, and the support for growth in the tech ecosystem and diversity, with a particular focus on startups and scale-ups. So he would have presented a lot of information about what the government is doing in that. That's not what I'm going to talk about. So I'm the CIO of a large government department. I'm the guy in the suit. I don't see anybody else in a suit here today. The last time I felt a bit like this actually was doing a presentation when I was an analyst to the Australian Signals Directorate in what would have been about 2007 or 8 about the benefits of cloud services for government. And so presenting to a huge group of cybersecurity specialists about cloud services 5 years ago was a bit like being a tethered goat in the front of a room full of lions, I think. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to you about a presentation that I use to try and articulate to people how government agencies, particularly large government agencies, need to think differently about the way we go about doing ICT projects. My department actually is quite an active user of DevOps, and we're using some quite modern techniques to do things, but this is actually not that common in the public sector, and in particular in large agencies. So this presentation dwells on the idea that government agencies in many cases have kind of lost their ICT mojo, is the way I talk about it. And if you read the media and such, there's a long litany of failed IT projects in government, either because projects went bang, they blew up, or because they just consumed a lot of time and effort and delivered virtually nothing. So this is the problem that I'd like to talk to you about, and the way that we're communicating a different way of thinking about this. So the basic problem I'd like to talk about, and it's actually one that I imagine is the preoccupation of this entire event. It's the problem of ICT productivity. And the way I characterise the government situation in the last quite a long period of time is actually just that we are not productive enough at producing ICT systems. For the effort, cost and time that we put in, we get too few ICT systems out the other end. I'm a bit pejorative in accusing the way we go about things as stupid digital stuff. And what do I mean by that? There is too much stupid digital stuff going on in public sector IT. Projects that are either too small, in the GovHack sense, not that that's a bad thing for education, but it's not necessarily a good thing for producing systems that we can use in government, or projects that are too big. They explode, big bang, under their own kind of nonsense. The simplistic, mechanistic thinking applied to complex problems is a real issue. Usually that manifests itself as a requirements document. Outsourcing your common sense, too much use of consultants, too much of this thinking that we're unique. Get over yourself. Too much blinkers on, going to market in single application projects with a very heavy procurement focus. Too much flying solo on investments, failing to take opportunities to reuse things, reinventing the wheel. Ignoring and distrusting cloud services platforms has been a historical behaviour of government. Amateur, subscale cybersecurity. I chair the Victorian State Government's ICT security forums, and we have a huge problem with the fact that we have baked in amateur, subscale, underinvested security into our systems. Ignoring that puppies are for life, the whole idea that we will produce a system and not think about its ongoing iteration and support, and then keep doing all of that. So one of my quests as a CIO in government is to ban stupid digital stuff. Now, what's the alternative? And I characterise this as us having lost our mojo, and this is why I'm using these kind of blackboard type metaphor slides, is actually for a lot of people in government IT, we genuinely have to go back to school and relearn how we go about doing ICT projects. One of the big problems is this whole focus on application by application procurement, that we think of an application as a standalone thing, which we need to build or usually go out and buy, as separate from virtually every other application, and then we go through this waterfall process to do it. Develop the business case, get the money, etc., etc. You all know this story. And we see nothing until months or years, even many years down the track. The biggest problem in all of this is that common sense goes out the window. So common sense becomes overwhelmed with business cases and requirements and contracts. The documents get thicker and thicker and thicker, and the common sense gets less and less and less. The way we are trying to think about this is to move away from that whole concept of application by application thinking, and instead have a much more strategic view of what our platforms are and how we use those to create new applications. So the platforms that we are most enthusiastic about at the moment are the leading public cloud service platforms. So Amazon Web Services, Microsoft in all its platform glory, Azure through to Office 365, Salesforce as a platform as much as an application, so force.com, and ServiceNow in the way that it is emerging as a platform. And the key thing that is driving that thinking is the idea that these platforms exist outside of everything and are iteratively evolving over time and becoming more functional, more secure, more cost-effective, better, faster, cheaper. So even if you do nothing on a platform other than sit there and use it, the platform itself has a trajectory of improvement which you don't have to pay for, and what the goal is how do you become an intelligent consumer of the attributes of these platforms. And that's a real struggle for government agencies. That platform approach introduces the idea that we stop thinking about applications as a one-off thing and start thinking about applications as a configuration or an evolution or something that is built on our platforms. The starting point is the platform, not the requirements document. So this is a really, in some ways, a radical idea for government, because government likes the idea, typically, historically, that you start with a blank sheet of paper, which is a requirements document and a business case, and then you build something to those exact requirements. This whole approach, starting with a platform, actually means you're trying to find a practical sweet spot in terms of what the platform does versus what you're looking for. And the whole approach here is to try and work out a way to let common sense break free out of these kind of prison of documents that it tends to have been historically embedded within. So I talk about this as sweet spotting the scope. So from the earliest conversation with users in our department now, we're trying to make sure that we work out a way for common sense to have a voice in the whole conversation. So rather than saying, what are your requirements, and let's write those down in a big thick document, and even worse, get consultants to do that in a big thick document, then we're trying to have practical conversations about what is the problem, and start from the very first conversation to inform that with what can the platform do? What can we do as a development organisation in order to produce a system? And then we have an iterative kind of thought process that goes around and around. Okay, now that we understand the problem and we've got some ideas around how we could solve it using our platforms, then we have an iterative discussion of what would be useful, what can be done, and take that around and around to try and arrive at a sweet spot kind of concept of scope. Well, I use the phrase platform plus agile to describe our method now. The key to it is starting with the platform, using common sense to sweet spot the scope, and then adding agile iterations to the platform in order to produce the first minimum viable product of an application, and then to iterate that going forward. Seeing is believing. One of the fundamental changes that this whole approach causes is the ability to get something visible in front of users as fast as possible. So I actually prefer to use the idea of minimum visible product instead of minimum viable product to make the point that the goal is to reduce the time taken to get something visible in front of users. And it's just so clear when you see it in action. And you people live in this world, so you kind of take it for granted that this is the way things are done. But it's typically not the way things are done in government IT procurement. A visible product trumps talk, arm-waving, requirements, documents, and PowerPoint slides every single time. I've been involved in so many projects where people will have been involved in a project for even years and still not have any clarity across a large group of people about what the system actually is doing or what it will do. Because in all of those years, all they've seen are Word documents and arm waving and people talking and PowerPoint slides, and nobody has produced a visible artifact of the actual system. And even if they have, it's been in a kind of throwaway prototype sense rather than an actual first iteration of the product. So platform plus agile is the key approach. Start with the platform, do agile iterations on top of it. Why? Because what that does is it creates an application plus data plus insight. And this is turning out to be a transformational thing in my department already. So the idea of the application is kind of obvious. So, of course, we need a new application. That's the whole purpose of the project. But almost as a spin-off benefit of the application functionality these days, the most important thing is actually getting access to new data, which was not available before, so that that data can power up insights into what's working, what's not working, what should we do differently. And if I tell you just an example case study of how this is playing out and having real impact on the way services are delivered. So I was in the whole of government role in Victoria in 2001 to 2006 in DPC. And during that time period, in 2004, Victoria Police created a system to automate at their end the collection of family violence observations by police and people in the field. So they would go into a house, they would make an observation that there appeared to be domestic violence of one sort or another. That would get filled out on paper, go back to Vic Police headquarters, they would enter it into a system, and for the first time they were able to enter that data into a system and store it. But from 2004 to December last year, that data was faxed to the Department of Health and Human Services and the social services sector. 70,000 faxes a year. So I was there in 2006, And there was talk of a system to automate those faxes. I came back into the government after working in Ovum in 2014, and it still had not been implemented. What the heck? How can that be? A whole decade, and they've tolerated the idea of 70,000 faxes from police into the social services sector. So using this approach, platform plus agile, we managed to get a project up to automate that and turn it into a triaging portal in 6 months from start to finish. That went live in December last year. No big fuss, no big project, no big business case, no nonsense and all the usual things. The project was developed in a DevOps manner using platforms that we already had within the department through a series of agile sprints, and it went live in December. Now, so from an application point of view, that's a good result. Now that nonsense of faxes is replaced by an automated digital system. It's more efficient. But the data that has generated is already changing the way policy decisions are being made around how the flow of incidents, family violence notifications comes in from Vic Police, and giving Vic Police information that they never had before because they can see these incidents on a geospatial map, they can analyse them over time, they can look at patterns in the perpetrators and such like. So this is, at one level, obvious, right? We would go, what the hell are you talking about? Of course that's the thing. But how can it be that for a decade, from 2004 to more than a decade, to 2015, no one had had the wit to implement this system? And the problem is that the previous kind of logic of all of these things was this is a difficult IT system between complex stakeholders. It's going to be a big project. It's going to cost a lot of money. We need a business case. We need to go to government. We need requirements documents. We need to do a tender. We need to commission someone to build this thing, blah, 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 blah. There were multiple attempts at mobilising the project, but it never actually happened. Until we were able to unpick all of that logic and just say, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is start with an objective to get this system implemented as fast as we can for the minimum possible cost, using in-house people who are experienced in our platforms and know what to do, and just empowering them to get the hell on with it. So the benefit is the application, the data, and the insights that creates for what to do next. And so I call this compounding organisational learning. So the idea is simply that we learned in primary school that $1 deposited each month is a better thing to do than $12 in at the end of the year. Why? Because of compounding interest. So this is a very powerful kind of concept in terms of how we can empower organisations to innovate more quickly using ICT. So that L17 project example, the family violence referral, is a simple example. In 6 months, we changed the landscape of people's understanding of how that process could work and what's happening with that data and what practice actually is. So after 6 months, the entire organisation has been through a learning journey and is in a different place and is in a position to take the next logical step forward for what would be done. The traditional approach to thinking about projects in government tends to think of this as we would rather put in $36 at the end of 3 years and get nothing in the entire intervening period, because until the fully blown project is delivered, nothing happens. Nobody is learning anything. So this compounding organisational learning kind of model is enabled by the new capabilities with IT that all you guys are doing. The ability to do systems in smaller increments in a more agile way, in an iterative manner, such that as fast as possible you reveal a new art of the possible in a tangible way that's not just talk and arm waving. So steps to recover ICT Mojo that I'm kind of spruiking in terms of my department and the public sector generally are firstly to understand what is really stupid about the way we currently do ICT and just stop doing it. Understand the difference between applications and platforms And from our point of view, how to value platforms, how to have skills in them, how to procure them in a way that you can leverage them and make agile projects possible. Understand the fact that it's not just about the application these days. It's about the data and the insights that that can generate. Empower your people to use their common sense. This turns out to be common sense, you know, as apocryphally the case, is not always that common. A lot of people are just so wrapped up in process thinking that they can't stand back from it and say, well, hang on, what's the common sense thing to do here? And we've all, I mean, I don't know how much of you have worked in government projects or large projects generally, but everyone's been involved in a project where, you know, most people in the project team know that this project is stupid and is heading in the wrong direction. But everyone's kind of just in a position where you can't do anything about it. So stopping that situation, from my perspective, is the key to banning stupid digital stuff. And the way to do that is as early in the project as possible to empower people to use their common sense, to scope it and to go about it in a way that gives it the best possible chance of delivering something early. Because what that does is it creates that compounding organisational learning cycle, that we can all do that. So that applies to not just the business systems project itself, but also to the IT function. So my team, I've been in this role 2 years, and we are in a totally different place now than we were 2 years ago, because we ourselves are benefiting from this compounding organisational learning effect. How are we doing that? Because we're running a fairly large portfolio of a large number of relatively small systems projects. And we're staying well away from any concept which is like a big bang, big IT project. Why is that? Well, because those big projects just don't enable you to learn quickly enough. You're stuck in a big project for 2 years, learning virtually nothing until it's delivered, as opposed to having a larger number of smaller, more agile projects, which your wheels are spinning around much more quickly and you're learning. Delivery is strategy, speed is safety, platform plus agile, learning is good. And that's all about empowering common sense. So, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I've got a few questions, if you don't mind, internal organizational practices. And you're obviously doing that. So I guess some praise for us. Now for a question. How are the non-geek parts of your organization taking this change? Are they partnering or stonewalling?
That's a good question. Like this compounding organizational learning is about taking everybody on a journey of some sort. And not everyone is initially enthusiastic about this. So even within an IT function, business analysts, for example, as a group, are sometimes some of the biggest blockers of this type of approach, because their career is built on writing these big, thick requirements documents. What are you saying? How can you start something when you don't even know what you're trying to do? You know, we need to focus on defining the business requirements and the business need. So there are quite a few different parts of the organisation that have had to go through a bit of a learning experience, but I come back to compounding organisational learning as a method. Seeing is believing. So if you can just get a largest number of small things happening in an iterative manner, then actually everybody starts to see results and starts to see what you're talking about. So stop the arm waving and get with the delivery. Delivery is strategy. And that's actually the change management strategy as well. Because when people see things being delivered, then they change their ideas.
How did you overcome the business case requirements culture? And how do you go about obtaining some funding to kind of start those things?
So obtaining the funding is the challenge. Yeah. And this is a real problem in smaller organisations that don't have a depth of funding to have some flexibility within it. So if you have to literally go to the treasurer, to the state government, to get funding to do a single project, then you're kind of stuck in terms of having to do a deal with the devil to get that money. And usually the deal with the devil is that you need to fully specify a business case in order to get the money. How can I give you the money if I don't know what you're going to do? And that's a real problem. So from my perspective, that's why I am in Department of Health and Human Services and not another department, because it's a large enough department to both have sources of funding within its envelope and also to have a team of developers, like a large enough in-house IT function to exercise common sense to get stuff done. So as long as we keep our projects kind of smallish and not too scary, then we can exercise flexibility in how we fund them on a more common sense outcomes basis. And as long as you then, and the flow of delivery and making sense of that as best you can.
Thank you. And are you planning on influencing other government departments to implement what you've been talking about?
Like that's kind of my quest in a way. So I'm a bit of a ranter and a raver about this stuff. So this is, I think, a big change that has to flow through the public sector, and I'm reasonably active at trying to socialise the ideas of that. But to go back to my point on minimum visible product, like delivery is strategy. So there's only so much that can be achieved by just waving your arms around and talking about stuff. And the most important thing to be doing is delivering results. And then people can look at it and say, wow, how have they managed to do that? You know, what the hell? That project, that L17 project that I talked about, the L17 family violence referral, a lot of people still look at that and go, they just can't believe that we did that. It was a very complex project across multiple government departments with highly protected and secure data delivered in a very short space of time on an enterprise-grade, protected level security platform. So those sort of projects just become the exemplars which demonstrate why this is a better way to go about doing things.
Thank you, Steve. And last one, controversial. I think we're asking controversial questions today. What went wrong with census?
Sorry? Oh, what went on with census?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't have to answer it.
yeah. Look, it's not my role to talk about it.
Thank you, Steve.
I tell you what, one thing that those sort of events do create in the CIO community, though, when you're being hammered by things that are going wrong and, you know, there's just disasters left, right and centre, those type of events are really useful for CIOs because at least you can have a thought process which goes, thank God that wasn't me.
Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated.